My name is Riley Semenek, and this is my personal literacy story. One of my earliest literacy experiences is a little magnetic game I had on my fridge growing up. It was called Leapfrog Fridge Phonics. I used this at such a young age, so I didn't learn a ton from it, but it was my first introduction to letters and letter sounds. I would sit in the kitchen when my parents were cooking, and I would place the letters in the little space. When I did this, it would give me 3 options. One would say the letter, the next would say the letter and its sound, and the third would sing a little song with the letter, the sound, and a word that started with this letter. Next, still at a very young age, I was very into picture books. At this point, I had absolutely no reading abilities other than being able to recognize letters and sounds and the odd word with the help from my parents, but I would still sit with all my favorite books for hours, and I would interpret the images and create my own story and read it aloud to myself. It was super important for my actual understanding of stories to be able to interpret other aspects like this, as well as just great for my letters and sound recognition. Then my parents put me in preschool at the age of 4. This was my first learning experience away from my parents and in a classroom setting. In preschool, I was able to get a start on learning about things such as tracing, learning with toys such as blocks, and the alphabet. This was a big turn for my literacy learning, as it was my first experience in a school-related setting where I was being intentionally taught along with other kids. When it was time to go to kindergarten, my parents enrolled me in the French immersion program. I'm beyond grateful my parents chose to do this because it has proven extremely beneficial in my learning from then out. I stayed in French immersion all the way through until I graduated. I believe it's so important to be exposed to another language, and it has been major in my literacy development to date, as I still consider myself very strong in terms of reading, writing, and speaking in French. Later on in elementary school, once I had fully learned to read, I started getting into reading for fun. My older cousins had passed down a series of Geronimo Stilton books that I became obsessed with. Other than picture books when I was little, this was my first interest in reading simply for enjoyment. I spent hours on end reading these books, and in the process I learned new words and stories, as well as developing a love for reading. Lastly, in elementary school, in the later years, I had my first library research experience. We learned how to pick a subject, find a book on said subject, and write alongside the book. This was an important literacy experience for me because it was the first time writing based on things I learned through research and based on someone else's work and knowledge. And it was also my first experience working in a library and being able to find books based on something I had to write about. My first important literacy event from middle school was through the creative writing enrichment. At this age, I loved writing stories and wanted to continue on with it. I joined this group where we met outside of school to write creative pieces and get direct feedback from the teacher. This was major in developing my ability to write freely and advance the quality of my writing, as well as the vocabulary and the structure. Middle school also brought my first experiences with social media. My first platforms were Instagram and Kik Messenger. These were my first ever interactions with these forms of media and sparked my social media presence from then out. I learned how to communicate through these platforms as well as manipulate different features for different purposes such as learning, connection, and representation. In high school, my learning and literacy began to branch out to delivery methods. Now I was learning to communicate my understandings to others, specifically large groups of people. In high school, we worked majorly on our abilities to present through speeches. This was an important literacy event in terms of the way we share information. Public speaking was an essential skill that will prove extremely important in my chosen career path as well as a teacher. Lastly, and definitely not least, one of the most influential literacy learning experiences I've had to date has been all my collective university classes. Especially through my education courses, I have read the work of so many academics, interpreted so many different perspectives, and expanded my ideas of education and learning as a whole. The influence of a diverse range of classes has and is currently still shaping the literacy-based person I am and will be as a future educator. Thanks so much for watching my video.